Hi, this is Dave Wachter. I'm the artist of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and you're listening to Southern Fried Geekery.
1, 2, 3.
This is the best time.
Did you not read Immortal Hulk?
I did. That's a valid point. Also, what was that Deceased that Tom Taylor wrote?
Yeah, Year of the Villain's Infection.
Yeah.
Did y'all see that tweet that said, boy, I bet humanity is really regretting not inventing those 3 seashells right now. And then it said, this tweet is for exactly 3 people. Laugh myself, man.
I love Twitter. Well, all right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Southern Fried Geekery podcast. As usual, I am Caleb Alexander McKenzie.
Matt Trogdon.
And I'm Craig Lance.
And welcome to episode 116. I want to start off this week by apologizing for my own incompetence from last week. As you guys might have heard, we had some issues with the audio. So apparently my computer decided to reset. And it sounded like we were talking from a tin can.
Well, we would fire you, but Matt or I, neither one want to do what you do.
Exactly.
So.
Yeah.
Want or can.
Yeah. No, I think I have faith that you could figure out how to do it. It's really not that hard.
With
you just
your help.
Yeah, you just don't want to. So I appreciate you guys allowing me to continue to do this thing. With
do
you.
all the
See,
hard
what we're
work
going to
of
do,
the
Caleb,
show.
we're going to transition you out. You're not fired. It's a transition.
Yeah, could you please explain to the guy that we hired how to do your job?
I'm curious who that guy is. No. So yeah, just wanted to start off by apologizing for that. We hope that you guys stuck around. We hope that one episode was not enough for you to just say, hey, screw those guys and never come back again.
If it was, screw you.
Well, they're not going to hear it anyway. So let's talk about the 6,000-pound elephant in the room, right? COVID-19. It's kind of storming America. It's storming the world right now. It's going everywhere. And I don't want to get too much into it because a lot of people are tuning into this and everything else to kind of get away from the real world. I want to reiterate on one thing. As we talk about self-isolation, as we talk about social distancing and stuff like that, this is arguably the best time to have to worry about something like that because we're so interconnected via the internet, via Facebook, via Twitter. We have FaceTime, we have Skype, we have Google Hang, all of that stuff. So if you're somebody who...
Google Hang?
Yeah, Google Hangouts.
Huh.
Yeah, that's a thing. So you can get multiple people
Says
video
the old
chatting.
man in the room.
Yeah, that sounds made up.
No, it's real. It's a real thing. At least I think it is. That's what the voices told me. But no, if you're, isolating, being alone, dealing with all the anxiety that comes with this thing, it can be scary. Depression is very real. We are concerned about mental health things in this country now, as we should be. To keep people on the up and up.
Some people are.
Well, we should be.
We should be,
yeah. So the point behind this is to reiterate that we do have a Facebook group. It's Southern Fried Geekery on Facebook. Click the search bar, type that in. It'll pull us up. You jump in there. We have a Twitter feed. We have Instagram. We have email. We are extremely connected to the world as a whole. And even though you might be sitting alone in your house, in your apartment, in your room, you're worried about going outside, you've got friends at your fingertips. And all of us on the Facebook group, all of us here, everywhere else, are more than willing to, if you need to, jump on the phone with somebody for 5 minutes. You want to FaceTime for somebody for a little bit. You want to talk about comics just to get your mind off the stuff. Hit us
DM
up.
me, I'll send you Caleb's phone number.
Yeah, exactly. You don't have to go through a call center in India. But seriously, whatever we collectively as a community can do to help one another out, that's what we need to do. So, take your mind off of it. It's like your friends are at your fingertips. If you got to be alone in a room, it's the best time to do it in the world because we can, we can talk to each other. Craig's making scary finger motions. I don't know what he means by that, but I can only make inferences. And also, that was my easy way to pitch in that we have a Facebook group that people should join.
Come join us.
But I do mean that from the bottom of my heart. I don't want people getting depressed alone in the rooms and the sadness take over.
It's a perfect time to get caught up on your reading.
Fuck yeah, it is. It's super.
Stay off of the news. I mean, don't get me wrong. Watch a little bit of the news so you know what's going on, but don't sit on there for 24 hours a day getting depressed. Watch a little bit, know what's going on in the world, move on.
So I'm curious if things do go in a weird way, and we do have to spend a lot of time locked in a room. What do you guys have a hobby outside of reading comics to spend your time like apocalypsing?
Well, MLB The Show 20 came out last Friday. And so that's pretty much what I've been doing since Friday. Since I don't get to watch baseball, I'm just going to be playing baseball.
Going for Rookie of the Year, huh?
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
I mean, you know, I'll just sit there and kill hours and hours and hours.
Describe to me the feeling of seeing the Padres win the World Series in that game.
Well, it's the only way the Padres are ever going to win the World Series. So I get very excited when it happens.
Yeah.
Because it's never happened in real life. So,
Matt, what about you, buddy? What you got planned?
If I get run out of things to read, is that the question?
You're just contingency. Maybe you want to take a break from reading and do something.
You get reading overload.
Yeah, nothing super creative, I suppose.
Watch documentaries.
Watched some documentaries, man. I love a documentary.
Nice.
Yeah, so
any lined up on your queue that you can think of?
So I'd like to watch the new one, McMillions, about the McDonald's Monopoly scam.
I heard about this.
Stephanie watched that.
Yeah, I want to. That one's. I'm letting that pile up in the old queue.
That's my Stephanie, not Jerry Stephanie. Just to
gotcha.
Yeah. So that one comes to mind. You know, I watch them as they come out, so I don't have a whole lot I'm waiting on. Got a lot of History Channel programs I got queued up. You know.
So what you're saying is, if I find any obscure documentaries that you might not have seen yet, I need to send them your way.
Yeah,
I will do so. So I downloaded a program on my computer. I have the luxury, I guess it is, of having a touchscreen computer. Like I can fold my laptop in half backwards, and it turns into an iPad, basically. Even though
I can do that to mine once.
Can you? Just only one time. This one I can revert back.
You can do anything once.
I ordered a stylus from Amazon, like a really nice little fancy stylus, and I downloaded this program that lets me take pencils or art and then basically ink them, trace them, whatever you want to call it, embellish them. I'm not an artistic person.
Inking.
I don't. No, when professionals do it, it's called inking. When Caleb does it, it's called trying my best.
I don't know. I saw the one you did last night. It looked pretty good, man.
I'd never done it before, so I'm giving that a try. Like I said, I'm not an naturally artistic person.
If you're putting together a comic book and you need an inker, holler at Caleb.
No, yeah, let me drop out of law school to make that comic book money. Loved it. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm gonna try my hand at inking digitally.
And the other big thing that happened for me this week was Star Wars got released early.
It did.
Lucasfilm dropped that. We're assuming because, for people quarantined, let them start watching early. So I'm excited for that. So
nice.
Not that I haven't seen it 800 times.
I was going to say,
but 800 more.
Can you quote it yet?
Not quite, but
So I'm going to put up a thread on our Facebook page next day or two, or just asking people what their plans are. What hobbies outside of reading comics are you going to do? And while we're talking about that, reading comics is a big part of what we're planning on doing, right? It's what we do every week. We read a ton of stuff, and I am curious about what you guys have been reading this week. Matt, what's on your short stack this week, brother?
DC's The Batman's Grave #6 by Warren Ellis, Brian Hitch, and Alex Sinclair. The kids would call this Amazeballs. Mm-hmm. This fucking book is fucking great.
It is good.
It is so damn good. I'm just loving every one of these.
The interaction between Gordon and Batman. It is fucking amazing in this book.
Well, and I tell you what, we're getting just such a satisfying helping of is that's Batman acting like a detective again. We have not seen this in so long, and it is being done so well.
Well, in Paranoid Batman, they're in Arkham, and Gordon says, "You seem to know your way around here pretty well." He's like, "I could get out of here with my eyes closed." Oh. Why is that? Just in case somebody breaks out and you got to get them? No, in case they lock me in here.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so good, and Hitch,
it really is. I'm glad you got me back on it because
Hitch's
really
layouts are also. So, also I read from Image Comics Reaver #7 by Justin Jordan and Nico Henriken. This was really good, as I expect it to be. It's going in a new direction where Eson Breaker has gone back to basically a little village that he came from, and
no, go ahead.
Yeah, and that's the setup, and I'm not going to spoil it or anything, but that's the setup. He's gone back to the town he's from with the intention of being what he calls a better man,
right?
And he was a really, really bad one, so he wouldn't have to put a lot of effort into being better. But yeah, so get on that one. I fully expect it to be just as good as the first arc.
Yeah, so I didn't get on that because on the first arc I wasn't on it because I get all of them from
Justin.
Justin himself. And so I guess I didn't get transferred to the second volume. So there is one on the wall, though. I'm thinking about grabbing it.
Don't think about it.
Okay.
Yeah, please.
There is no try.
Yeah, think
When I saw
about it.
this morning that Caleb was reading it, I was like, damn it.
Man, it's good. And also, thirdly, from Image Comics, I read Moonshine. I think it was number 17. I neglected to write down the issue number for some reason.
Fine.
This was actually the last issue in this story. It wrapped up.
Really?
Really?
Yeah. Brian Azzarello and Eduardo Risso. Brian Azzarello's got a few other things going right now, but Eduardo Risso does not. And when I got done reading it and I saw end at the end of the issue, all of a sudden I was like, well, this isn't going to work for me. I need more Eduardo Risso.
I'm going to have to get this one in hardback or trade.
I wonder
or
if
something.
it's 18. You said you didn't write down the number. I wonder if it's 18 because that would be 3 6-issue arcs. 17 is a weird number to end on, and it may be 17. I'm just
so
saying.
is 153 or
That's
whatever.
yeah.
163.
Yeah, I was thrown off by the it being the finale. So anyway, yeah, more Eduardo Risso, please.
Yeah, absolutely.
I agree 1,000%. I read the first arc of that. Need to read the rest of it.
I haven't read any of it, and I can't believe I didn't because I love
it's werewolves and moonshine.
Well, not only that.
Yeah, and it goes into voodoo. Yeah.
I love Azzarello and Reason. I mean, 100 Bullets is one of my favorite series, and so those two together are just a peak thing. I can't believe I didn't get on that. Before Craig goes, just because Matt kind of reminded me, when we do our short stacks, we kind of do it like a spoiler-free thing, so it's not that big of a deal. So I never did the spoiler warning before we do our short stacks, but just in case, spoiler warning, we do talk about comics on the show, and there are going to be some things in here, especially when we get into our roundtable and our individual books for the week. We are going to spoil lots of little fun stuff, and so if you haven't listened or if you haven't read the book that we're talking about, go check the show notes, see where the next one starts, jump to that time. And just enjoy the rest of the show and then come back and listen to it. But we don't want to spoil it for anybody. So handy dandy, full spoilers, Southern Fried Geekery warning for those.
Yeah. You want me to go?
Sure.
Okay. My first book, if you don't need a spoiler warning for, because if you haven't read it by now, you're probably not going to. I read the Facsimile edition of Detective Comics number 38 by Bill Fingers and Jerry Robinson. And I guess I'll go ahead and say Bob Kane because his name's on the book. But... this was the first appearance in the origin of Robin. Good time, read it if you have a chance. In addition to that story, at this time, Detective Comics was still a detective comic book, and there were 6 additional stories in it. So you don't just get the Batman story. Second book I read was The Man Who Fucked Up Time, number 2 by Aftershock, John Layman and Carl Mostert. This book just gets crazier every issue. Yeah. I mean, he goes in, he fixes everything, so he thinks, comes back, he quits on his way out, so he no longer has access to the time machine, walks out, and nope, everything's more fucked up than it was, all because apparently his past self somehow still sent the flowers to his girlfriend, or his ex-girlfriend. And then lastly, I read The Rise of Kylo Ren number 4 from Marvel, Charles Soule, Will Sliney, and Guru FX. This was the final issue of this 4-part miniseries, and it ended with him actually becoming Kylo Ren, from Ben Solo to Kylo Ren, and it showed him making his bastard sword Claymore lightsaber that he has. So they kind of retconned where the crystal came from, because back in the visual dictionary for The Force Awakens, it was Vader's crystal. And that's why you had all the crackling, because it was busted. The new thing they do is they cause crystals to bleed, and that makes them red. He takes his Jedi crystal and makes it bleed and turns it red.
Wow.
And builds his lightsaber.
So you can get blood from a stone.
In Star Wars, you can.
Huh. All righty. All right. So I had a fun week this week, catching up on some stuff. And so one of the issues that I've been reading that hasn't really been doing it for me, and I think we've talked about this on the show, we've definitely talked about it in person, I've not been nearly as impressed with Jason Aaron's run on the Avengers as I was hoping I was going to be. But this past week, Avengers 32 came out. Again, Jason Aaron, Ed McGuinness, Francesco Mana. And this one got me back on board a little bit. It's finally starting to pull some of the threads together. from the book, and it looks like things are about to get nasty for the Avengers. You've got one of my favorite characters who's having a moment right now, honestly, in comics that he hasn't had in several years. Is Namor. He's in it. Things are happening with the vampires. They've got their own nation now. A certain special Russian superhero team. There's a weird version of the Squadron Supreme that they've had an arc with.
Ran by a resurrected
Phil Coulson, yeah. And then Mephisto is doing his thing. And so in the different arcs, they've all had their own separate moments, and it looks like Aaron's about to braid them together and kind of fully flesh out his plan.
Yeah, I jumped back on this issue as well. I'd skip the entire Star brand and stuff, and as it turns out, I probably didn't need to read it, because all you needed to know is that Star brand's now a baby that they're taking care of in Avengers.
Yeah.
Mountain, so
and that's pretty much it. And again, I love the Avengers. That's my team. I feel the way about the Avengers a lot of people do about the X-Men, and it hasn't been great, but this was a fun issue.
Yeah.
And this was really, it kind of locked me back in and got me hopeful for the future.
I'm going to jump in a little bit. Speaking of those two teams, did any of you happen to look at the letters at the end of Immortal Hulk this week?
No, I did
Because
not.
I peed
read
a
them.
little.
No, I didn't. I haven't.
Are you in there?
What's that?
Are you in there?
In where?
The letters for Immortal Hulk.
No, I am not. But what I read was a response from the editorial team that insinuated there may be a Immortal Hulk X-Men interaction.
I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Hurry, please. Now, please.
Yeah. Gimme.
I mean, Wolverine versus Hulk is pretty much a
Right.
Al Ewing writing that?
Yeah.
Can you imagine this shit?
Yeah.
Sign me up right now.
Dude.
Hulk is Hulk.
The second book that I read this week was Lois Lane, that I want to talk about it anyway, is Lois Lane #9 by Greg Rucka, Mike Perkins, and Andy Troy. This is a dark book that kind of ties into current politics, and if you're not interested in a book, like if you just want escapism, this is not the book for you, flat out. But somebody's trying to kill Lois. And she's a reporter, and she lives in a time where it's not necessarily safe to be a reporter. And she's had to tell Superman to back off a little bit because they really want to, she needs to dig and find out where this is coming from. She's being helped out by the Question, and of course, one of the perks about being Lois Lane and or also being married to Superman is you have access to Superman's friends, and if you got to go start hunting people down, who do you want on your side but
Batman.
the Batman? So she's got bats.
Personally,
and she's
I
got,
want Detective Chimp, but
yes, you got the bats, and you've got Renee Montoya in this, who's one of my favorite characters, and that's Greg Rucka's girl, so he treats her amazingly.
is she the Question?
Mm-hmm. Yep,
Currently,
she sure is.
Okay.
And then thirdly, and this stems out of a conversation that we had last week on last week's show that you may have missed if you got annoyed at the audio. But I went back this week and I reread, and emphasis on reread, read Sonja number 13 and 14, because I did have them and I had read them before. And so, I'm going to dodge a book, I'm sure, when I say this. I'm going to stand by what I said. These are really good comics. These are not great Mark Russell comics. They're look. I'd already read them. Honestly, they're kind of completely forgettable. As far as 100% for my taste. They can be different from you, and that's fine.
Wow.
For me, they're not nearly up to par with the work he's doing at Ahoy Comics, which is fair. Sometimes they're like that, but they are good comics. So
I think it's a different kind of book.
It's a totally different kind of book.
No,
Yeah.
for sure.
So if you're expecting his satirical look on current affairs, you're not getting that in Red Sonja.
This is a war strategy book.
Yeah. And that's fair.
I'm glad to see him branching out and not just doing satirical stuff to show that he has those chops as well. And it's got enough funny in it. I think he does.
Oh, absolutely he
I
does.
don't
You
think
don't
he
see
does.
the war strategy?
No,
in this?
I know it's a war strategy book, but it's a very cut and paste by numbers book.
No, it's not.
100%
No, that is a well-researched war strategy book.
The dude read the first chapter of The Art of War. Okay. Slow
No,
clap.
sir. Incorrect.
They are good comics for my taste. They are not good Mark Russell comics. The first 12 issues were great. Now I'm just I don't care anymore.
Oh, man. I care lots.
Well, good. I love that you care.
Weird.
I'm going to keep reading it. So sometimes it bees like that. Sometimes Mama said you're going to have days like this.
The great thing about this show is we don't always all agree on what it makes a good comic. Sometimes Caleb's just wrong.
No, Caleb has said none other than 4
Art is
times now
subjective.
that these are good comics. They're
I'm
just
messing
not
with you,
great
dude.
Mark Russell comics.
I'm messing with you. Art's subjective anyway.
Oh,
so,
for sure,
you know,
1,000%.
Yeah.
Except this.
The great thing is you could have 10 people look at the same piece of art, and I'll walk away with 10 different feelings about that art. So, as per anything, you don't always have to take, our recommendation. You should listen to our recommendations, but
It's interesting.
2 out of 3 enjoy it.
Interesting to me how much it parallels actually with the 40 years of the Israelites walking through the desert and going to, dealing with the different warlords and stuff, which is I think where he's pulling a lot of that from.
Quite possibly.
Yeah, because he is a theologian at heart. So yeah, those are my 3.
Yeah.
Anything? You guys want to throw anything at me?
No.
I brought you my honesty, and this
You've dug yourself in such a deep hole. Anything we throw is just not going to.
No, seriously. I mean, I could get that if you're expecting one thing from a Mark Russell, and as you said, it's not that you think they're bad books. You think that it's not your favorite Mark Russell stuff. I think that certain times you come to expect certain things from certain writers, and when you don't get those certain things, I'm not saying people in general, when you don't get what you expect from someone, sometimes it gives you a different view of it.
Well, and not only that, but you also have to keep in mind that he is constrained a bit by Dynamite. These are not his characters. This is not a creator-owned thing.
It's intellectual property.
His Wonder Twins work, I think it's on par with his Wonder Twins work, and a lot of people love the Wonder Twins work.
Yeah. See, I dropped off the Wonder Twins books.
That's what I'm saying. It's like it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's a creator-owned property that he is not allowed, I think, to fully flesh out and do the amazing work. I think he's taking 3 steps forward and then taking 2 steps back to get it to where it needs to be. And with Mark Russell, I want Mark Russell unfettered. I want him just going balls to the wall crazy. And I don't think he can do that with his creator-owned stuff, the intellectually owned properties. And so I think that's why it's just kind of okay, he's doing work.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So another book, as they thumbs down me. All right, you guys ready to talk about a book that we all read this week, though, that we'll see how it goes.
Expecting certain things from certain people.
Right. Typecasting, if you will. We all read this week. We decided that we were going to get together and all jump into Decorum #1 from Image Comics. And this is a big book this week. It's gotten a lot of attention, so to speak. This is, of course, written by Jonathan Hickman, drawn by Mike Huddleston. Russ Wooten on the letters, and Sasha E. Head as the designer, the graphic designer, which, Hickman always has somebody listed as the designer for his books, doing a lot of the work, the heavy lifting, so to speak, on it. Before we really dive into the story, I'm curious, as always, what you guys thought about this book.
I liked it.
Liked it?
Mm-hmm. Man, I loved it, and I think it's a beautiful book. The art is just absolutely beautiful in this book. So I would buy it for the art alone if it wasn't a Hickman story.
Yeah, no, I think it's a fun story. And we'll get into some of the things that I kind of just okay, as far as the story goes, but as Craig said, I'd give anything for this art, and I'm going to lock into the rest of the issues because of this art, because it's just doing some amazing things. So I think around the board, we all enjoyed the story. I didn't enjoy the $4.99 price point on it. But
I don't think they're all going to be that way. This was a big book.
It was thick.
$4.99.
Yeah, you kind of got three mini sections in it.
Yeah.
So, all right. So the story starts off as Hickman stories kind of tend to do. At least the more recent Hickman stories, he's building a world. He's creating a universe. We saw something similar to this being done in Tartarus a few weeks ago when we read it. He's a well of ideas. Especially when it comes to sci-fi. And so he's created this universe. And in this universe, there are these planets. I mean, we've explored the galaxies at this point. He's taken the idea of the galaxy and he's made it almost an imperialistic idea. And so what's happened is, the main planet, or the big group, the Confederation, so to speak, has branched out, and they've conquered all these other planets. And as they've gone into these planets, they've taken the indigenous populations, and they have put them in spheres. They put them in this own little contained universe as they kind of just steal the resources and do whatever they need to do to get them. And of course, with the numbers that they're doing, and some of them completely fail. Some of them wipe out. They put a bunch of people into stasis. Some of them thrive and evolve and become something else because they're unfettered by. They're protected. Like they're they're not affected by the outside world, so to speak. Of course, as this imperialistic organization, this confederation comes in and pillages their places. But in the midst of all this happening, there's a rebellion. Like this empire falls, and there's something that Hickman calls the rise. It's almost the rise of machines. It's very kind of similar to what he's got planned out in X-Men. You see this moment to where the machines kind of become sentient, so to speak, and they start going after and destroying these different preserves, these planets. And that's what the first part of this book does. It just looks at these machines, which, visually they look like conquistadors. They roll into a planet that's very, I think we would it looks kind of like what would happen in the Amazon when we come and we find these undiscovered tribes. And, they're rolling up on the beach, and these indigenous populations, they fight back. They're like, hey, no, get off my beach. This is mine. You can't have it. And of course, they're outnumbered and they're outgunned. They don't have the technology. And so all hell kind of rains down. Well, when the singularity, and that's the word I was looking for a while ago, with the rise of singularity, when these machines, this AI, get to this planet and they've kind of conquered it and cleared the beach, they're mining these people for information. And what they get out of it is there's this pyramid that's hidden. It's this, this jewel, this gem. It's in the shape of a diamond that they've had hidden on this particular world. And as the machines take over the world, it kind of breaks free and it flies off in space. And the machines are going to be after this thing. And they're chasing it all over the galaxy. They're just going everywhere looking for this thing. And Hickman includes a map and shows you where this thing blips up every once in a while to kind of see where it's at as far as the known galaxy goes. And they're just chasing this thing all over the place. They can't find it, and they're after it. That's the broad picture. That's the big scope of the world that we're living in, that Hickman is immersing us into. And that's going to be the overall story. But of course, this big picture idea is not nearly as fun if you don't get attached to the characters. Hickman, one of his tools, one of the things he's known for, is he gives you this broad picture and he zooms in on a particular thing. And so he does that, of course, in this book. As you get past the first half of the book, he leans in and he starts focusing on this young girl, this character, and she's a courier. She's somebody who, you pay that they go deliver a package, and these are not this is not an easy job. This is potentially dangerous because she's also working for black market people, delivering stuff that might not be legal or having to get around and go into dangerous places. And as she's doing this is all it's all precursed on the fact that this society, the world that they live in, has gone in and they have taken they invented a virus. And they, timely, kind of scarily so, that spread throughout the world. But because this was a synthetic virus, they had a ready-made cure. And so anybody who got this virus, they went in, they locked up in the stasis, and you had to pay a fine. You paid a fee, and if you paid a fee, you get your loved one cured. And if you didn't, they had to keep paying for the stasis until you got your money together. And so this young woman, she's looking at this, there's an old grandmother type figure and there's a young boy locked in the stasis. And the guy that she's there looking at, it's like, hey, don't do that. Don't touch those. Those are mine. And so they kind of get into a little bit of a back and forth, like, don't talk to me like that. Like, I'm here to do your job. And this individual is hiring her to take a package. But this is, like I said, sometimes you got to do jobs that aren't easy, that aren't legal, that you're walking into bad places. And this apparently is going to be one of those jobs because he's willing to pay her triple her normal rate to do this. And she, she's good at what she does, so she talks him up to 4 times the normal rate. And so she's got this briefcase and she's going to go make the bank. And he's got her in a rock and a hard place, right? Like, she can't not take the job, but she's also the best she is at what she does. So she is who he wants on this job.
She's the Wolverine of couriers.
She is. Bicycle messenger with claws. And so she's taken the job, but she's really not happy about it. She doesn't like being put in this position, but she's got to do it. And so she might as well get the most out of it that she can. So she goes, and she's got her package, and she's going to take it. And who she's taking it to, at least who she thinks she's taking it to, is this kind of mafioso figure. It's somebody that lives in a sector that let's just put it this way. The head mob bosses aren't allowed to come into this place because of some unspeakable things that he's done. So the crime boss that she's taking this package to is kind of a governor, so to speak. He's acting in his stead. They've made an alliance. He's going to do what he needs to do to, it's kind of like the cartel bosses can't just exactly walk into anywhere they want to in America because they're wanted. So they have people who do it for them here. And he's not a good dude, right? Like, to say the least. He's got his minions around him. He's kind of a scary figure, but he's expecting this package, and so he's kind of got these 3 bodyguards that hang around him. By the way, they're wearing Thing 1, Thing 2, and Thing 3 shirts, which is like a lot of Hickman books. He makes up this language. That's the way you break the code. Is the fact that they're wearing Thing 1, Thing, so you know how to spell the word thing in the in this key. So if you're code breakers out there, use that to go figure it out. But he's got his minions around there, and they come in. They're like, "Hey, boss, girl's here with the thing," and so he's like, "Oh, bring her in." And he's talking down to this person, because it's
just a courier.
It's just a courier. Except this person is not the courier. This person has arrived before the courier did, and she presents herself to be, anyway, a representative of the I'm going to use the word cartel because that's the best equivalent I can come up with. A representative of the cartel, and, she's come to she needs to have a conversation with him. Something's not on the up and up. At least that's the way she puts it. And of course he's defending himself. He's like, I'm not stealing anything. I'm doing my job. I'm doing everything else. And she's like, yeah, I know. But, look, still, we got to make sure everything's cool, and I've been sent here to talk to you about this. At that point in time, our girl gets there. The courier gets there. And, then she comes in, and she's got her briefcase, and things kind of focus on her a little bit for a moment. And, the guy's like, well, I need you to open the briefcase. And she's like, I can't. Like, this thing it's biometrically sealed. It's got the handprint scanner, a retina scanner. It's got everything. If I try to open this, it'll kind of suck into a black hole. I mean, literally, it'll defunct into a singularity. That's the way this thing works. And she's like, you must have to open it. And he's like, well, I mean, who's it addressed to? And she says the name, but that's not our mob boss's name, and that's not anybody in the room's name. And then they all look at the woman. Who is, again, not presented herself, and she's a very prim and proper woman. The book is called Decorum, and that's a lot of what it's focused on. She's very, the way that she speaks, the way that she walks, the way her social graces are represented. She's very prim and proper. It's almost as she went, to debutante school. And she cares about the way the language is spoken and her mannerisms. So they all kind of look at her, and she's just like, oh yeah, that's mine. And so she walks over, she places her hand on the briefcase, opens it up, and there's a shard of a crystal inside. And as she's talking, as she's opening this up, she's telling the guy, yeah, we all agree you've done exactly what you said you would do with the deal with the cartel boss. And you haven't stolen. We've been watching the money. So you haven't been taking the money because you're smart. You got that. But what you did is you ratted us out. We found out that you're the snitch. Like I say, it would be the equivalent of telling the FBI things when you're running stuff. And, we can't have that. That's not going to work for us. So I'm here to kill you.
What he did was he actually made it so that his position was required.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what he did is he lied. Well, he told the government about them so that they would have to have him in his position to be the face of it. So he put himself in a position to be that guy. So he's doing everything that he's supposed to be doing because he set himself up to do it and get rich from it.
Yeah,
but, but in the meantime, he had to betray the mob or the cartel or whatever to do that.
Yeah, I missed the part where he was playing from the other side. I thought he was just
No, he did it to set himself up in that position.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And so he does this, and like I said, she starts taking out everybody. This crystal, it reminds me of the lance from Saga, like because of the way it just kind of becomes larger than it is, and it's almost like
it's like a ribbon whip or something.
Yeah,
laser ribbon whip.
It's an incredible functional weapon, and she just dispatches with. I mean, poor Thing 1 and Thing 2 and Thing 3, they just didn't have a chance, and they just get
laser
wiped
ribbon
off.
Whip sliced them in half.
They just get wiped off the board, and of course she's telling our young courier, keep your head down, dear. This will be over momentarily.
Yeah. Don't look.
And so she just kind of clears the room, except for this greasy bastard who's playing both sides and setting himself up. And he tries to buy her in those last minutes. He's like, look, okay, you're an assassin. I can make you rich. But that's not who she is. She's a good businesswoman. She's a woman of her word. She's all about the decorum. She's not bribable. And so she's just like, no, this is not the way things work here. Actions have consequences. And she just puts him down. And then she looks back at the girl, our courier, and she's just like, well, now what are we going to do with you? Because you're now a witness to this crime, and you've seen the face. So how are we going to go back out? And that's where the first issue ends.
I think Courier Girl is about to be trained to become an assassin. That's my presumption, but,
Learning curve.
Yeah.
Well, and it's funny because you get the juxtaposition of those two characters, and our courier, she's very street. Like, she's very... she's Brooklyn. She's New. She's gonna cuss. She's not ladylike, and I'm using air quotes there. She's not this prim and proper person. Because the courier was like, you were exactly not the courier. Our assassin was, you were 1 minute late. It's unforgivable for somebody in your line of work. And she's like, oh, well, fuck me. Excuse me for not like busting my ass to get to the murder party in time.
right.
And so it's going to be the juxtaposition of those two characters going forward that I think is going to be really fun.
I agree.
Yeah.
The assassin courier part was my favorite part of the story.
Yeah.
The world building, of course, is always Jonathan Hickman's. As you said, he builds these fantastic universes to play in, and then focuses in. And I'm really interested in these two characters and what happens with them.
Yeah. Same here.
So the draw to me is the art in this book. I think stylistically, Huddleston takes you everywhere. There's surrealism in this book. There is impressionism. There's realism. Some panels
Sometimes on the same page.
Yeah, no, like from panel to panel, it changes. Sometimes he gives you just an outline of the figures, and it's none of them are colored. It's just the line work. There might be a blip of color in it, and then other times he gives you what looks to be very Monet-like oil painting style of just hyper detailed landscapes or figures. He goes from giving you very realistic humans to almost just formless shapes that you recognize to be that same person or that same figure, especially when he's talking about the building of the actual universe, when he's doing that legwork in the front, and he gives you the indigenous people, which, like I said, they look like some of the hidden Amazonian tribes, very detailed in their facial features, in the artifacts that they have. And then he shows you the robots, the singularity. In one, it's again, I go back to Monet. It's an impressionist painting of a conquistador synthezoid. And then his bosses, the people above him, are almost, there's no detail whatsoever. They're stick figures with triangle heads, wearing a symbol. And in that aspect, that's where the genius of this book comes in. And of course, when you get into he does those same things when you get into the end of the book, when it's the more interpersonal connections. But you look at what that makes you feel on the page and how it breaks the rules, so to speak. When we're talking about a book named Decorum, and you've got, look, sometimes in art, we get locked in. It's got to be this style. If it starts out this way, the proper thing to do is to finish it this way. You don't blend styles. Of course, you can if you're somebody like David Mazzucchelli, but typically we don't see that. You're almost breaking the rules of sequential storytelling, and that's what they're doing in a book called Decorum. And I think that's fascinating. I think that's the genius of it going in, and I love looking at these pages.
I mean, yeah, every aspect of this book is just beautiful. Within the same page, you'll have panels that aren't colored. You'll have, and when they are colored, they're beautifully colored.
Yeah.
And it's in the layouts. Oh my God, the layouts are unbelievable. But man, the story grabbed me, the art grabbed me, the colors grabbed me. I don't know, and it's Hickman's got into the last few books with the started with Black Monday Murders, I think, with this very graphic design that he creates for every book. But the story is good. It drew me straight in.
I almost think it goes back a little bit further than maybe, because I remember seeing some of this stuff in his Fantastic Four work. some of this
It's
stuff.
been a while since I read the Fantastic Four book. So, yeah.
Well, and I only read parts of that. But also when he jumped into, when he was doing his Avengers work, and he's starting off in New Avengers, and they went to Mars because they had, I forget who exactly it was, but he planted the seeds in Mars, and he made this little race of people, and they spoke in code,
Right.
And everything. And like where it's an amazing story, and I love that he's building it. It's less impressive the fourth time you see it. That's where I'm at. And maybe this is it's just an internal thing of expectations. But I know I texted you guys when I got done reading it, and I was like, this is incredible. And if this was somebody that I'd never read anything else before, I'd be saying, oh, this person's a genius, and get these people on everything. But with Hickman, I feel like he's using some of the same, and really well, but he's using the same tools that he continually brings out of the toolbox, if that makes sense. Almost typecasting himself in a way. He's not letting himself, he's doing some of the most wide work in comics. He's doing some of the most experimental work in comics.
I don't think anybody's better at building worlds.
No,
Hickman
and that's
is.
not what I'm saying. But in the experimentalization of what he's doing, again, it's less impressive when you do the thing the fourth time in a row, and then you're no longer experimenting. You've reached a point that nobody else is doing, and you're kind of just staying in that realm. Like I said, I feel like I'd read this before. And of course, not the same characters, but I feel like the same world building as some of the stuff that he did in Avengers. The politics of some of the same stuff he did in East of West, like setting up these factions that work together. The graphic design, the maps, the way that they do the Krakoa in the X-Men, and the way they show the map in this, it's almost the same. It's almost like this could be in the next, like all of it could blend together. And to me, for my money, like I said, it's ingenious, it's brilliant, but it's more of what I've seen from Hickman. I'm going to continually hope to see him expand and to build his toolbox and to build on their creativity, and not just lean back to almost like he's got an outline saved that he can just shove all the information into and flesh out the same thing with maybe a little bit of different plot, but the same bone structure. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, yes and no, I guess I would say. I mean, when I read this, of course I liked it. It's kind of, if I understand what you're saying correctly, it's like listening to a band that you enjoy, but saying, well, this sounds a lot like their last album.
Exactly.
And I don't really understand that take on things. I buy a band's new album because I'm expecting it to sound like their last album. That's why I like them. I like them because of what they do. Yeah. And I like Martin Scorsese movies because they look like Martin Scorsese movies. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Not because they look like, Michael Bay movies. So you saying that took some of it out of you. It's a little confusing for me. I mean, the Jonathan Hickman book looked like a Jonathan Hickman book.
Right.
Is a plus, not a minus to me.
No, for sure.
You brought up Monet earlier, and Monet drew the same bridge repeatedly throughout his life, differently each time. Mm-hmm. But it was the same bridge.
Right.
It's similar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I get that the graphic design, I could see how you could look at the graphic design of this and come to what you're saying. Mm-hmm. 'Cause I feel you there. But I think the story is enough different from what we've seen that it's a new world, it's a new thing. And but I'm not saying I don't feel you, because I do feel what you're saying. I get what you're saying. I don't necessarily catch the same vibe, but I get what you're saying.
And maybe it's unfair. I'm stepping on my own toes here. Maybe it's unfair because there's 1,000 other comic creators that use the same bone structure in all of their work, and they give you. And in that case, it really does feel like more of the same or average. Maybe it's just more noticeable for me because Hickman's doing things that no one else is doing in comics, and because it's so standout. And again, there's nothing wrong with the book. It's just like I said. I kind of had some of the same feelings about this latest. And you brought it up talking about music. Tool put out a new album this year, first album in 10 years. And I went into it. It was like, okay, the last album 10 did really just change like a lot of things about music. It was something we'd never heard before. It was experimental. It was a concept album based off the Fibonacci sequence. Like these people are just brilliant, genius people, and they are. the Tool album they gave us, while it's full of amazing songs that I listen to on a regular basis, those songs could have been cut and pasted, shoved into that last album. There was nothing inherently different or changed about the style. And on some level, that's comforting, but there's still no musical evolution to it.
Following is people that follow music, and we keep going back to that. You can look at bands like Metallica that tried to change their format as they went, and what happened to them. Their fans blew up on them and didn't like it anymore. They wanted Metallica. They didn't want whatever the new stuff was.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying creators should do what they think is their art.
Yeah.
They shouldn't do it for the people anyway. They should put out what their art is.
Yeah.
I'm not really sure where I'm going with that, other than I'm okay with, as Matt said, I'm okay with something being reused, a formula being reused if it's done right and it's done well. And it's in Hickman, I trust, is going to do this really, really, really well.
In Hickman, we trust.
I do. There's certain writers that I just trust that they're going to give me what.
Oh no, I don't think we're gonna get. And again, I think this is brilliant. I think it's more and I think that maybe that's as we kind of work through our own internal monologues here. I think maybe that's what it is. It's more noticeable because he's doing some of the most brilliant work in comics. He's doing things that no one else is doing. So, 1,000 other painters can draw a bridge, and you look at 1,000 pictures of a bridge, and you're like, you don't really notice things. When Monet draws the same bridge, you're like, oh, that's the same bridge that Monet did before. Let me go look at the little nuances, the little tweaks that he did. Let me see how he's learning. He's doing this character study. He's doing this landscape study. And I think that's a lot of what Hickman does in the breadth of his work, seeing the way that he can change comics to being there's prose in this. There's
been prose in a lot of his
stuff.
Yeah, a lot of his comics as of late, and it's all important.
Yeah,
don't skip the prose in a Hickman book.
It is, and it's kind of blending. It's genre breaking. If we think of, and again, I don't like thinking of comics isn't a genre. It's a medium, but he's bringing in.
It's medium changing.
Yeah, it's multimedia, and he's doing that in a way that it imbues graphic design. And it is futuristic, and that's where for me, it was like looking at something I'd seen him done before, and I don't think that that's necessarily a knock. It's just, okay, this is where we are, and maybe that's where I think
you were wanting a little bit more expanded on what he's previously done, and you didn't get that. So I can again, I'm not saying I disagree with you. I just I didn't have that same feeling, but that's once you said it, I don't necessarily disagree with you. But again, if you like something, it's okay to do it again.
I also think it's important to note this is a 6-issue series, and so it makes sense to me that he's not trying to break the mold on something. If he's doing another East of West that's going to be 40-something issues long, I think he will do some incredibly different things.
East of West did not follow that formula with all the graphic
design.
No, it
didn't.
Stuff.
It had something like him and Nick Dragata did something completely different. Now I will say it had some of the same when it laid out like the maps of the United States where your different kingdoms
some of
were,
that, but
like that was where that seed was planted, and this is where it's came to. And you see a lot of the crossover from what they're doing in X-Men, which this isn't the same graphic designer that's on the X-Men books, is it? I think it's.
Oh, I haven't looked.
Yeah, I didn't look at the name. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but I'm curious to see what this is going to do, because it is Hickman, and because he is playing with tools that he knows how to use, and he knows how to use very well. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun with this book.
What's really neat with what Hickman's doing lately is he's actually going a step further than a lot of writers do. Very kind of becoming Tolkien-esque. In his mind, you can tell by what you're getting, both in languages and things of this nature, and the depth of the worlds. He's actually creating that world before he's writing the story. He's not just writing a story and placing those characters in a world. He knows everything about that world, whether we get it all or not. I mean, we're still getting Tolkien world building stuff,
right?
Almost 100 years later. I think Hickman's doing that, and you can see that in his stories, whether it's X-Men, whether it's this, whether it's East of West. He's developed far beyond what you're seeing in the pages.
For sure. His brain must be a fun place.
Or a tortured place.
I can't imagine what his storyboards look like that he has. You know, because to me, and I doubt writers do this, but to me, in my mind, I always picture writers have a board with all their different characters and what they're doing.
Well, no, we've talked to some writers 100% do that.
Yeah.
Hickman seems like the type of mind to me that his boards look a lot like his graphics that he
Probably,
shows us. Like, I think
probably.
he actually makes the maps and stuff. I would love to see his studio.
Yeah,
At some point.
it would be amazing.
Yeah.
10 minutes inside his brain.
Yeah. So I'm locking into all 6 issues.
Oh,
for
absolutely.
sure.
Yeah.
On board?
100%.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. For sure.
I want more conquistador robots.
Yeah. I'll be honest. I don't know that I even caught they were robots the first read through. I did go back and relook at it this morning and notice that. But the first time through, I was like,
Well, the first
I thought
time
it was an invading force.
Well, and it is
Right,
But
but just
the first time you see it, he's all shrouded in like he's cloaked. You don't know it's a robot, and then because the stylistically it changes so much, it's like what. Like it takes you to, and again, that's the effect that they want you to have. What's real, what's not real. I mean, you're talking about little kingdoms that are inherently like closed off from reality in little bubbles, so that they, almost like zoos, so to speak. Kind of the same thing he does in the future of X-Men.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that dipped in here.
He's definitely borrowing from his own genius.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if that's what we're trying to get to, I can't argue that point.
No. I was just getting to the point that it makes sense that you could have missed that they were robots because, like I said, you jump from one thing to the
I
other.
meant overall on what you were saying earlier is that he's borrowing from his own genius.
I think that's the name of the episode, Borrowing from Your Own Genius.
Yeah.
I do it all the time.
I steal yours.
Yeah.
So
I don't have any genius, so any you perceive from me comes from you two.
I'm calling bullshit on that. Maybe one of the smartest humans I know.
Whatever. Let's move on.
Speaking of smart humans that I know, Matt, what'd you read this week, brother?
Okay, so I'm going to talk about a Punisher book yet again.
What?
Yeah.
What? Matt's talking about Punisher?
I tried not to do this, but this was the most impactful book I read this week, and I have to talk about it.
Okay. You talk about what moves you, brother.
So, Punisher Soviet number 5 by Garth Ennis, Jason Burrows, Guillermo Ortega, and Nolan Woodard. This is number 5 in a 6-issue series. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about what's happened so far. I'm just going to get right into it, and because I want people to read the story. Frank Castle and his counterpart in this issue is an old ex-Soviet Special Forces soldier. Those words together are hard for me to say. Named Valerie. So they're moving through a forested area in the northeast. They are looking to ambush a group of hired security of a Russian gangster named Pronchenko. Pronchenko is an ex-Soviet Special Forces commander. He led the unit Valerie belonged to in the past, known as 5th Company. Valerie has been hunting Pronchenko's gang soldiers down and killing them in hopes to eventually flush out Pronchenko. Frank has been doing the same, and that's how these two met and started working together. Valerie has been doing this because of an act of despicable treachery that Pronchenko committed against his old unit. While Valerie and Frank have been on their mission, Valerie has told Frank that killing the gang leader would actually be too lenient. Capture and exposure would be the harshest punishment for Pronchenko, and he has been trying to convince Frank of that. Frank's only response to that has been, quote, "That would be a first." So emerging from the woods, they intercept 6 men who are part of this Russian force that have actually ended up hunting them, Frank and Valerie. 3 professional security, and 3 of the men are actually the gangsters' sons. They look to be in their late 20s. They act like spoiled brats who are trying to act like tough guys. At one point when they join up, the commander of the security group's like, we're going to move out in a few minutes. There's coffee and donuts over there if you need it. And one of them goes, coffee. And they start shooting cocaine and eating donuts. So,
like you do.
Yeah, you do. So this is who Frank and Valerie encounter as they emerge from the woods. So they kill a few of the security guards, but capture the three sons. Suddenly, a helicopter flown by some other Russian personnel arrive on the scene and open fire. Valerie grabs a large caliber weapon and opens up, causing the chopper to actually crash.
Yeah.
As Frank approaches the crash and kills their surviving Russians, he finds Valerie. Valerie is on his knees, bleeding profusely, with one of the helicopter blades sliced into his midsection.
I now see why Matt loves this book.
Yeah. So Valerie says, "Going to do it my way then?" Frank only replies, "This you trying to guilt me into it?" The older soldier looks up at Frank with a soft expression and a slight comforting grin as the blood flows from his body. At this point, the narration changes to Frank recalling the scene as such, quote, "Then his voice begins to go. 5th Company," he says. 5th Company, on your guns, to be concluded.
Mm-hmm. How many goosebumps do you have right now? Can you count them?
A lot.
Can you count that?
Oh, God. This old man bleeding to death, saying those words.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, my God. Man, I'm a sucker for an old war combat soldier story.
Mm-hmm.
So that was that really hit me when I read that. I was like, oh my God.
Well, I mean, look, every once in a while a book comes out that's tailor made for us. I mean, that happens all the time. This one, I mean, the Punisher is one of your favorite characters. Any book that's hyper violent really piques your interest. You love Garth Ennis and you love old war stories.
Man,
and Garth
Jason
Ennis,
Burroughs.
Jason Burroughs is amazing too. I mean, you can't take that away. That dude's got talent that we can only dream of having. But like this is one of those things that was just tailor made to make you fall in love for it. Yeah, death by helicopter blade.
Look at the look on that old man's face.
He's inconvenienced. That's what that look says. Like it's not that he's scared. He's not pissed that he's not. He's inconvenienced. And does anybody? I mean, even historically, I don't think anybody's written war stories as well as Garth Ennis does.
Yeah, I don't know of any in the comic book realm, any that I've read that I've enjoyed better.
No.
To be fair, I mean, there's a lot I know that's out there that I should read.
Yeah.
Who he praises that has inspired him to write all these over the years is actually Pat Mills and his World War I stories called Charlie's War and Battle. Was a English war comic that he praises up and down. I've not gotten my hands on any of those to read, but this has been a fun read, obviously, but that last page in this book, I did not see that coming.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not see that coming. And that old man bleeding out, calling to his old unit years ago, I was like, oh my God.
It hits you in the chest.
Oh man. And what is that going to cause Frank to do? Because this is all of a sudden a different motivation that we've seen Garth Ennis write in this character before.
Yeah. So
how is this going to progress? This has cranked the quality of this series way up.
Yeah.
For me.
That's become kind of the unofficial theme of this show is people doing things and doing it really well and adapting it to at least in this episode, adapting it to new ways that really elevate the story, I think. It's fun stuff. I mean, death by helicopter blade.
Man.
Some of my favorite moments, stupid question, but you read Punisher Platoon, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Some of my favorite moments in that story were when they were sitting around the table, those old men who were telling the reporter the story.
Yeah.
Sitting around that table and discussing and like
the jaw scene, where did you get your scars?
Yeah, kind of reminiscing almost begrudgingly, like they're not bragging about it, but they're just, and it's not nostalgic in any way, but it's more than just a recitation of the facts.
Well, I love listening to old combat veterans talk, and what I like even more is reading in between the lines of these combat veterans that aren't talking about the amazing things they did, but their counterparts are. And a great example of that is in Band of Brothers.
Yeah.
Watching the end of the series Band of Brothers, where all the characters you watched in the show, their real life representations are talking about their experiences. And, one of them was from Arkansas.
Yeah.
and he started that, a demolition business. He beat a German soldier to death in that barn to keep him quiet from being discovered. And then you had that Commander Spears. Did y'all watch this? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Amazing. And then you see him.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you see him at the end of the show. He's this old man, and you're like, that guy did some amazingly brave things in his life. And, he comes back to the States and becomes a regular guy with a job. That's incredible to think about.
Well, it's in writing, we always go back to the iceberg theory that Hemingway came up with, which is what you see as 10% of the story. And I think Enos is really a master of playing with that. And it's that same notion. I'm going to tell you 10% of what happens, but I'm going to allude to the 90% of things that you can't even fathom, but you have to. And of course, when Hemingway did it was a lot of PTSD stuff that he was going to go into. But Enos takes that, and I wouldn't be surprised if Enos has studied a ton of Hemingway either, because Hemingway wrote not necessarily war stories, but post-war stories, and I think he plays up with that a lot into making his work really broader than what's on the page, like bringing that sense of depth, like emotional depth to it. That's again, and I think that's
in a
what
Punisher book.
I think that's what makes him the best war story writer, Punisher writer. Because he takes what was arguably a two-dimensional character and just brings a psychological weight to the stories around him that mechanically is, just beyond my scope of reasoning. Dude is insanely good. It's the last part of that sentence. So love to hear how much you're loving these stories, man. What about you, Craig? What'd you read this week, brother?
I'm going to ask you before I talk about it. You guys know who Nicnevin is?
Steve Nicnevin?
No, the name Nicnevin, where it comes from.
Oh, no.
Huh?
It's Scottish folklore for the Fairy Queen.
Okay.
So the book I'm going to talk about is Nicnevin and the Bloody Queen. And it's published by H1 Originals. It's a graphic novel, probably the equivalent of 4 comics. Mm-hmm. It's written by Helen Mullane. Dom Reardon did the art on it. The colors are by Lee Luffridge. Lettering by Robin Jones. And the cover is by Jock.
Nice.
Yeah. Which actually is what drew me to the book. Mm-hmm. So this book is the story of a 15-year-old girl named Nicnevin, who is from London and is being forced by her mother to leave London and go to their ancestral home in the countryside for the summer. You can imagine how this is going to make a 15-year-old girl feel.
Right. She
doesn't want to leave her friends. She doesn't, she's angry about having to go. Their dad has to work, so he's staying there. So the mom, the girl, Nicnevin, and her brother Gowan load up in their car and they head off to the countryside. As we all know, all the creepy shit that ever happens in the world happens in ancestral homes in the countryside of England. This book, first of all, let me back up. This book actually opens with a old woman laying on a stone table, bloody, and then it backs up to a man standing over her with a sickle, and then it cuts to Nicnevin's family.
That's not where I thought the family vacation story was going to get.
Yes, it is more than you think. So after they arrive at the home, the first thing that Nicnevin finds out is that there's a missing woman from town. Spoiler alert, it's the old woman that was on the stone being ritually sacrificed. Second, that their now past grandma was known as a witch to the locals. And thirdly, she discovers she has a new affinity with animals. All of a sudden, animals just love her. They come up to her. She'll be driving down the road with her new friend that we'll get to here in a minute, and animals will just stop in front of their car and stop the car and come up to see her and stuff. And she doesn't know what's going on.
It's Snow White in this bitch.
Yeah. She soon becomes attracted to this new friend, this man, Reggie, who's a middle-aged man. Now, remember, she's 15. Mm-hmm. He's middle-aged. He drives a red sports car that looks a bit like a Ferrari. And, you can kind of figure out why she might be attracted, good looking dude. And
Probably has a vanity plate.
yeah, probably. So she becomes so infatuated with him, she starts watching his house from afar. Like she climbs up in this tree that she can see his house and just watch his house. And she starts finding ways to be around him. She'll intentionally put herself in his path so that they, go on a walk together, or they'll go for a ride together, or whatever it may be. One day, her brother's out playing football, or as they call it in England, or they call it football, we call it soccer.
Yeah.
With his new friends. When the ball goes into the woods, he goes to chase it, and guess what he finds? The body of the old woman.
I was going to say dead grandma.
Yeah. So he goes and finds her. Of course, this, completely tears him apart. He's just a broken, sobbing pile for pretty much the rest of the book. And then it cuts back to her, and she's out with her new friend Reggie for the day. She learns that he's into paganism, and he takes her out to this countryside, to this really powerful place that looks very much like where the ritual sacrifice happened, I might say. And she gets there, and she just gets bombarded with these visions, and she faints. And then she wakes up, and we don't know how long she's been out, and he takes her back home. And what you find out, of course, then is that her mom's really mad that she's been hanging around with this 40-something-year-old man, and, why are you doing this? And, of course, as it goes on, they just butt heads more and more and more. And as she becomes more infatuated, she contemplates casting a spell on him that she finds some of her grandma's journals. And she contemplates casting a spell to make him fall for her, or at least she sees it there in love, but he's just too shy to admit it. So she decides against that, and she decides to just confront him about it. Well, during the confrontation, when she confesses that she loves him and that she knows that he's in love with her, but he just won't say it, and he backs her down and said, no, listen, we're just friends. And during this conversation, he says, I have no interest in being with a 15-year-old virgin, blah, blah. And she says, I'm not a virgin. What makes you think I'm a virgin? Blah. And he goes, oh, you're no virgin? And that's the end of his interaction with her. So then she goes and she's sitting in the tree watching his house, and this girl walks into the house. And the next day they find out that young girl, has been murdered. That's where I'm going to stop telling you about this story, because you can kind of piece where it's going from there.
Yeah.
But the art in this book is absolutely fantastic. I love the layouts from the very first page. It's just beautifully done. Through the background of the entire book, there's a poem going on that's telling about Nicnevin, which you find out that it's a family name for them, and that there's always a Nicnevin woman in their family.
Gotcha.
So you can see where the tie-ins are coming to this story, but it's a fascinating read. I want you to read it.
For sure.
It sounds a little bit like it's a CW story where the teenager falling in love with the adult, but it's not. CW. I promise you.
I like some of those CW stories. So.
How'd you come across this?
I saw it in the previews and decided to order it. I saw the cover art in the preview and thought it was an interesting story. Our local comic book store, Kapow, ordered it for me, and it came in this week. So I will pass it off to whoever wants it next. But enjoy it, read it. It was a lot of fun.
Nice.
Sounds like they're playing with tension a lot, like through the juxtaposition of these characters. I mean, obviously the big one is the sexual or the perceived sexual tension between a 15-year-old and a grown-ass man. That,
well, and the tension between her and her mother that grows from that as well. At one point she calls her mom the shriveled old bitch because she wouldn't understand. She's a typical 15-year-old girl that did not want to be pulled from her friends in London. Now, she's in the city. Now she's out in the country. The first person she meets, she's completely infatuated with, and her mom doesn't want her hanging around her. And then, her mom's bitching about her being on the phone, staying in contact with her friends in the city. And it's like, what, it's very, like you said, there is a lot of tension in this. There's a lot of, it's a thriller kind of book. I read this entire thing, I want to say about a half hour.
Oh, nice.
Because even though it's it's not huge, but even though it's probably about 4 comics, it reads pretty fast, but you want to keep reading it.
Yeah.
And again, the art and the layout, oh my God, it just blew me away. I've not heard of Don Reardon before, and I didn't have a chance to look him up this morning, but I will definitely be watching for both of these creators on future books.
I like on the cover, so the cover, it's got the main character, standing there with their arms crossed, but in the background, I'm assuming it's like tree limbs, but it makes her look like a stag.
Yeah, there's a lot of references to deer in this.
Yeah.
There's one point where she's fantasizing being romantically involved with the
deer.
No, with Reggie, and it goes out pans out from her bedroom out into the country, and every animal around her is having sex.
Yeah.
So she's got this influence on animals. In the stags, well, just to spoil one little thing, she does ride a stag to go find him later.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, that's very intentional.
Oh,
and
nice.
I mean, there's lots of references to stags in this. So,
well, I mean, and when you talk about druidic culture,
Yes.
Stags are a big deal. In brown magic, which is the magic that people with an affinity to animals practice and everything. That's kind of a symbol for that. I can't wait to read that.
It was a whole lot of fun. Again, I wasn't sure who the Jock's the only name I knew on this book, and all he did was the cover. But I was pleasantly surprised with this book. So.
I saw online there was a Kickstarter thing that was that had to do with this.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I missed the Kickstarter, but
had to. I did as well, but again, probably because I'd never heard of the creators, which is that's a loss for us.
Yeah,
or at least for me, you ended up with the book. So
well, sometimes it pays to look through the rest of the previews magazine besides just the publishers you look at.
Oh shit!
And I've taken this from you, Caleb, as far as reading more graphic novels. I appreciate you kind of opened that world to me. I've been buying more of them.
Nice.
And reading more graphic novels as opposed to just buying floppies and reading floppies. So I'll thank you for that because it's opened the world for some great stories for me.
Nice.
A rising tide lifts all ships, man. We're all in this thing together because I would have never heard about this if it wasn't for you. So payback for me. All right, so I guess I'm last up. I read a book this week. Actually, it's from last week. Let me put it this way: I read between 15 and 20 comics a week, every week. That's a lot of comics. I have not been able to get this book out of my brain for 2 weeks.
Yeah, it was on your short list last week.
It was, it was on my short list. I've gone back and reread it. I keep finding more things.
It's a wonderful book.
And that book is none other than The King of Nowhere. And this is published by Boom Studios. It is written by W. Maxwell Prince, drawn in part by Tyler Jenkins, with the colors done by Hillary Jenkins. I am assuming that they are a married couple. I don't want to necessarily say that, put my stamp on that, because we also thought about that about Greg and Meg Smallwood. They're brother and sister. I put my foot in my mouth on that one.
Then you got the teams that are married that keep their creative last name.
Yeah, and I think they're a married couple, but they may just be in other ways related. But they're a fantastic art duo, and the letters were done by And World Design. So the thing I love about this book, again, I've said on the show, I'm at a place right now where I'm really interested in experimental storytelling. I'm really interested in things that are not what we've seen before, or that do different things on the page, that with the narratives that make you think, take your mind to different places, and that's inherently what this book is. So our main character is this guy, and you don't know what he's like in real life. You don't know what he's like in his everyday activities. You can make some assumptions, you make some inferences as you read the book. But his name's Dennis. He's a white dude, kind of got a douchebag looking haircut. But he wakes up, and he wakes up on the side of a road.
Sit the shaved head with the pompadour.
Yeah, like he looks like 2005 Eminem. Like that's what he looks like.
The best version of Eminem.
Bleached hair.
Gotcha.
But Dennis wakes up on the side of the road, and he's in a t-shirt and some blue jeans, and he's like, "Oh, we're doing this again." How many times are you going to wake up on the side of the road, or in a parking lot, or on a park bench that's too small? You got to quit doing this. And you kind of get the feeling that he may be kind of maybe not necessarily unsheltered, not a homeless person, but somebody who's used to getting blackout drunk, or to getting really fucked up on drugs and just waking up in strange places. Like he may have some addiction issues. he may have some psychological issues. You don't really know. Like, his mind works against him. He constantly feels like he's at odds with the chemicals in his brain, and that's, he's unsurprised to be waking up in unfamiliar places,
right, and
to have things being done. So he kind of starts walking towards the street, and there's a van that pulls up. And the guy rolls down the window, and he's like, "Hey, you're going the wrong way." But the dude's a deer.
Speaking of stags,
the guy has the head of a deer. He's got these horns poking out from his hair, and that's your really first clue that things might not be, mundane. Every average world.
This isn't Kansas anymore.
He gets the feeling, he's like, okay, I'm on a trip, or I'm dreaming. That's what this is. And I've been here before. Like, you do some LSD, which is referenced in the book several times. That you have these dreams that you're lucid in, and you just have to kind of ride it out. You're conscious in your dream and making these decisions. So he's like, okay, this is going to get weird, but I've been here before. And so he starts walking into town, and as he's walking into the town, he sees a sign, and this town is called North Werer, Waher, Waherick. But all the letters are scratched out, so it just says "Welcome to Nowhere." Population 999 with a speed limit of 37, which is a really odd number. Just want to throw that out there.
At 38, they will write you a ticket.
There is
no room for play in that.
Odd limit to the speed. But so he's looking for civilization in his dream, because he just needs to get through this, and he walks into this diner, and this diner is just a kaleidoscope of drug-induced mental creations. I mean, it's exactly what you think of when you think of an LSD hallucination. There's fairies walking around. There's a dude with horns that looks kind of like a devil figure smoking a cigar. Freddy Krueger sitting in a booth, blowing bubbles. It's just that kind of like mental imagery. It's a very surreal moment. So he walks up to the bar and he orders a drink, and the bartender's entire face is upside down. Like his mouth is where his forehead should be. His eyes are on his chin. His nose is upside down. Like, these are the surreal world. It's kind of an Alice in a Wonderland effect. The guy sitting next to him looks like a fish. It's a catfish. And he's like, "Hey, bud, I'm having a hard time. Would you mind buying me a drink?" The guy's like, "Go for it." And the fish's name is Jed. And Jed's a little worried. Like, Jed's got some problems. He's pissed off the wrong people. And so as they're sitting there sharing a bevy, he's like, this guy's going to show up here in a little bit, and he's going to take me out and beat my ass. I know it. I did some fucked up things, but it's whatever. And Dennis is just like, "Nah, dude, look, this is my dream. You're just living in it. So don't worry, none of this will happen, because I don't know your backstory. We're just here. Like, it is what it is. You're a fish. Obviously, I'm fucked up. So we're just going to get through this." And so they keep sitting there talking, and he's taking notice of the world around him. And there's winged people. There's people who look like Glob from the X-Men with with just translucent skin.
Is there any green fluid?
I don't see any green fluid on that one. And lo and behold, the door opens, and there's this guy that walks in, and he's got 4 arms. Actually, he's got 6 arms. Just all these arms, and he shouts at Jed. He's like, "I need to see you in the parking lot. You done fucked up, son." That kind of thing.
He's just mixing his MAGA hat.
Right. And of course, Dennis is weirded out by this, because he just promised Fish Guy, Jed, that he was, like, "Look, this is my dream. None of this is really going to happen to you." And so he gets in his feelings like, okay, this is one of those dreams where I get to be the hero. The little guy's getting picked on. I'm going to go out in the parking lot, and I'm going to stop this fight. And so he does. He kind of puts himself in the middle of this altercation, and one of the guys hits him. And in your own dreams, your own hallucinations, you're normally the hero. But even if you're dreaming, you don't feel things. You don't feel pain. He feels this. The guy hits him and is like, that felt really real. And so he starts getting his ass beaten. He starts fighting back and getting in the mix of it, because maybe this isn't a dream. Like, the lines are blurred. He can no longer tell if this is reality, if it's not reality, if it's a trip, if something weird has happened. Things are just going wrong, and he's now starting to be very afraid that this might not be something that he can just coast through. And in the midst of this fight, they get down and tussle, and there's a guy to the side that kind of shines a flashlight on him. He lets him go for a little bit, but he's like, "Hey, you boys done? I'd like to get home in time for supper." And it's a cop, kind of a country cop, like, cowboy hat, sitting on his cop car, smoking a cigarette. And he's like, I need you to be done. I need to go. And of course, Dennis is thinking, wake up, just wake up, dude, get out of this. And it doesn't work. So they go down to the sheriff's station, and the cop's talking to him if you look at other cop dramas and a cop brings a person who may or not be mentally competent to their office and starts telling them about how this isn't real and they're in a dream state, you can think exactly what the cop might be thinking. And in this case, it's a lot of that. It's like, okay, well, you're insane. And again, the person who lives in the fish world with 6 armed people is calling Dennis insane and really kind of curious about where he's from. And, nowhere is not the kind of city that really lets strangers walk through it. When a stranger shows up, people, they get a little worried.
Take notice,
That's like, who are you and why are you in our city? And Dennis is just like, dude, I don't know how I got here. Like, none of this makes any sense. And about that time, the door busts open, and it's a deputy, but it's also the sheriff's daughter. And she's a little mousy type person. Like, she's got little mouse ears, little mouth teeth. And she's just like, hey, you got some big guys on the south edge of town again. We got to go deal with it. And, this is going to be out of the, they all hands on deck kind of situation. So sheriff looks at Dennis. He's like, can you shoot a gun by any chance? And Dennis is just like, wait, what? Like, no,
thought I was crazy.
Why would you give me a gun? This is a terrible, are you not going to arrest me? He's like, no, I need your help. Come do this with me. And so they're driving out to the edge of town, and, they're passing people in hazard gear and gas masks and just all of these weird things. And they start seeing these giant footprints. And of course, Dennis is like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what is going on? This doesn't make sense. And out of nowhere, these giant iguanas start storming towards them. And like, the sheriff tosses him a shotgun, and he's like, shoot the motherfuckers. Like, what are you waiting on? let's go. One of the lizards like flicks out its tongue and grabs the sheriff and shoots the thing's tongue off. And again, he's just like really not in a good headspace, as you might not be, because this isn't a comic to where this is normal. This isn't. It feels like a dream. It's so surreal that it's almost like it's unconscious. But these things are having tangible effects, and he can smell things, and he can tell the texture of the world around him. That, like, the sheriff's just like, if you're gonna, appreciate you're really good with a gun, you want to kind of stick around here and help. And he's like, I don't really have anything else going on. I don't have a choice until I wake up in the real world, or till whatever this is unfucks itself. And so that's where he's going to go from there. He's going to go back with the sheriff and hopefully not have to deal with any more, raging iguanas. But he's going to have to kind of feel his way through this and hopefully find some type of level that he can stick to, something that will anchor him to reality and let him know what's going on, because he genuinely has no clue. In the meantime, as an epilogue to this, in the first issue, you see that same car from the beginning, and it's your stag guy, it's your deer, and he's driving down the highway, and you see somebody standing in the middle of the highway, and it's a guy, and it's a very just kind of average, normal looking guy, just kind of what we would think of as a human, kind of a dumpy looking fellow, and he stops, and of course, he just stopped somebody else. He's kind of a helpful dude. His name's John Doe, by the way, because that's funny. And the guy's like, hey, you lost? You need some help? And he just like, he holds up a picture, and it's a picture of Dennis. And he's like, have you seen this guy? And the stag guy, he knows how to mind his own business. He's like, no, dude, I don't know who that is. Or at least he may be telling the truth. He may not remember him. He's like, I've never seen that guy before. And this guy pulls out a nail gun and puts a nail right in the dude's head. Right in our dear guy's head, and just kills him right then and there. And he's like, of course you haven't. No one ever sees this guy. And that's where the story goes on. There is 0% things about this book that I do not love.
It was really
it is
good.
It's not only a surrealist story, it's surrealist art. Tyler and Hillary Jenkins work almost exclusively in watercolors, and the imagery that they give you, it is very Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It is very acid trippy. It is walking into your nightmares. I mean, like I said, Robert Englund is blowing bubbles in a diner booth. As
Freddy Krueger.
This books. It's just, they play with your perception of reality. The cover is Dennis sitting on a park bench holding a balloon that is a koi fish with his foot dipped into the street in the middle of the road, but the street is water, like it's rippling around it. And so they use these watercolor effects to really create this feeling of unease. And that's one of the things that I think comics do better than anything, is they can have an effect on your reader, and the visage in front of you really plays, it really works into the plot, right? Like it can do something. If you want a very crime-oriented story, the details are going to give you what's like picking you up on clues, so to speak. In this world, they want you to not be able to tell what is real, what is in your mind, what's made up. They don't want you to know if this is, even if this world is real. Like, it's that much of an idea. The whole thing is a metaphor, so to speak. And so they just keep doing these visual tricks to, as the reader, you can't get a hold on it. You can't get a grasp on this story about what it wants to. I mean, you get what it wants to be, but what it is. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, and it keeps you visually second guessing yourself. And I think that's phenomenal. And the only time you really get to a point that you're like, oh, this is actually happening, are those last 2 pages. Where the guy with the nail gun, I mean, this very No Country for Old Men moment, just puts a fucking 10 penny right between this dude's eyeballs. And like, that's the only part that you're like, oh shit, that really did happen. There's no question to it. And from a narrative trick, one thing I realized this morning as I was rereading this thing, all the narration, I mean, and Dennis is speaking in the first person because he's Dennis. All the narration is in second person. And that's something you don't see. You either only see first person or you see third person. But, it's either I or he. And this one, it's you. You are going here. You are having these thoughts. You are doing this. And the effect that has on a reader, if you've ever read a story that does that, it makes you
disorienting.
Well, it's disorienting, but it also makes you hyper aware of the decisions, and it inherently places on you some authority, or at least the consequences are on you, because the book is telling you, this is through your eyes. You are feeling these things, and you're like, oh shit, like that gives you it personifies the reader inside the narrative, and it's just completely disorienting in a book that's just made to disorient you. I think it's fantastic. Like, if you were to break this book down into an equation, everything adds up in this to have the perfect effect. Like, this is one of those things that it just comes together as more of the sum of its parts, between the art and the really psychedelic writing. Like, that's something we always think of psychedelic as being colors and blacklight posters, but the writing in this book alone is psychedelic, and that's
the book itself is an LSD trip.
Oh, dude, like, it just, and again, I just have to keep coming back to this book week after. Like, it's been on my brain. I can't get it out of my head. So I had to bring it here to talk about. I was going to talk about a different book this morning, but I needed to talk about this one and kind of unfurl it. And I can't wait for the second issue. I don't know about you guys. Boom Studios was one of my favorite publishers of last year. And they just keep putting out all the fancy words you want to use, but at the end of the day, it's just cool shit. So they're just rocking it out, and
they're one of the better ones right now for sure.
Can't wait to see what happens, and to see if we ever do get an anchor to what's real and what's not real, or to what even is happening. This book could end, and, I'm one of those guys, like, if you get to the end of the story and you're like, and then they woke up, fuck you, I'll throw the book out the window, Charles Soule. This book could do that, and it's been such a weird, surreal journey that I'd be like, okay, like, he could just wake up and it could have been a bad LSD trip, and I'm like, I'm cool with that here, where I would not be in 99% of the other books, just because it's so fucking wacky. I just enjoy it so much. So go check this book out, man. If you guys missed King of Nowhere, jump on it. Get it digitally.
I can second that.
If you're sequestered at home over the next few weeks and you run out of reading material, check that out. It's going to be fun stuff. You're going to enjoy it. If not, I don't know. I can't help you. Maybe it's just not for you, and that's fine. I love it. So, well, we ready to kind of start wrapping up, looking towards next week?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. I will go first if I may.
Sure. You're running it.
So, shit. This is you're Dennis in this situation, Greg. I just live in your dream.
Whatever.
So next week there's a book coming out that I'm heavy with anticipation for, and that book comes from our dear friends, our beloved friends over at Ahoy Comics.
Yeah, nice.
An amazing publisher that does some really cool stuff. And this is the end of season 2 of DragonFly and DragonflyMan from Ahoy, and this was actually the book that they launched on, that really caught everybody's attention. And I missed the first couple issues. I had to go back and read the first set. Kind of on my own. Mm-hmm. And so now that this is printed, I'm going to go back and get the entirety of the thing and read it all at once. And this book is written by Tom Pryor. It's drawn by Peter Krause and Jamal Igle. Jamal Igle is a standout when it comes to on this book to me. But I mean, that's nothing against Peter Krause either. It's just there's everything. But it kind of takes the idea of an Elseworlds from your big two. Like you've got DragonFly, who is he's a superhero in kind of an Archie-esque type of world. I may have that backwards, actually. Archie-esque type of world. And then DragonFlyMan is like the Frank Miller version of that. And they're parallel universes doing the same thing. And it throws them together in a weird menage adventure that's just really, really well done. And so, like I said, this one is the close of season 2 because Ahoy does their books in seasons. And as a lot of things are starting to do now.
Yeah.
So go check that out.
That more and more. Very cool.
Yeah. What do you got this week, Craig?
I'm going to go with Artemis and Assassin #1 by Aftershock Comics. Stephanie Phillips, Megan Hetrick, and Phil Hester.
Nice.
What happens when a time-traveling assassin and a spy from 1944 try to kill each other? Well, let's find out. Yeah, it's basically a time-traveling group of assassins that are trying to keep the time line in order.
Okay.
So we'll figure out how it all plays together. But I'm excited for that creative team. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Those are good
Hester's
names.
art's
Yeah.
fantastic, and I always enjoy Stephanie Phillips.
What's that gif of the guy doing the Italian mouth kiss? And mwah. That's
The chef's kid.
the chef kiss. That's what Hester is to comic art.
I agree.
What you got this week, Matt?
So I'm looking forward to, from Image Comics, Ascender #10 by Jeff Lemire and Dustin Nguyen. This issue is the conclusion of the part 5 of the story arc. Andy and his wife turned vampire, Effie, are locked in a life or death struggle with each other. Meanwhile, their daughter Mila, however you pronounce that, encounters the familiar face of a friend thought long gone. This has been are you reading Ascender?
No, I didn't read Descender, so
You don't need to.
I went. But I realize you don't.
You don't need to. It is a continuation of the
Yeah.
same characters, but you do not need to have read it.
Yeah. This is a great series.
Yeah.
This is Jeff Lemire at his best.
Nice.
And I love this series.
As Descender was, this is just picked up and continued on. It's
it's
so
really
freaking good.
I will get there. I did buy the first trade of Descender. I kind of even though I know you don't have to, I kind of want to work
Sure.
through it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
just
no, for sure.
To see where we go. So
Yeah, Jeff Lemire, specifically Jeff Lemire, thinking of Descender, writing the dialogue he writes in between robots,
Yeah.
AI robots, is is amazing.
Yeah.
It is amazing to read. Now you're a comedy bot. Remember that part?
Yeah.
I wonder what the legality is if your spouse turns into a vampire. Do you still get their 401k? How does that work? Like, what are the benefits from that? Because technically they died. Do you get to cash in that insurance policy?
Legality questions.
You think this is law school?
All right, that's it. No more of those.
I mean, okay, call it something else. Like, but if Roger gets turned into a vampire, technically he's still here, but he's dead. Can we cash in the insurance policy? I want the money. I don't know. Like, how does that
I'm
work?
sure that the insurance companies would find a loophole to that.
No, they're evil. They're more evil than vampire spouses. All right, boys and girls. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us for about the past hour and a half. We love doing this. It's my favorite time of the week, getting to sit down with my brothers over here and talk about some funny books. We hope you come back next week. We'll be here. We'll be sending it out. Like we said in the beginning of the show, things are kind of crazy right now. They're hectic. We want all of y'all to stay safe and healthy and just, try to focus on some positive things, like listening to podcasts. Come to our Facebook page. Tell us what you're reading. Tell us what you're doing. Tag us on Instagram. Hit us up on Twitter. Send us an email at SFG Podcast on the Twitter and the Instagram. And we are southernfriedgeekery@gmail.com on the emails. And you can just fire those away. We love you. Like I said, we will be back here, same time, same place next week. Try to have a good week. Keep your head on and go forth and love some comics.
Woo!
Jerry Woo. Terrifies me because Jerry's like up in an epicenter of this shit now.
Yeah, he is. Ugh. Yeah, he really is.
Get that boy home before he knows somebody. Lock him up for safekeeping.